Swimmers, welcome to another episode of the SwimSwam Breakdown. As always, I'm Coleman Hodges coming to you from Brooklyn, New York, joined by the swim scribe himself, David Clossy from St. Cloud, Minnesota. If you haven't checked out the swim scribe on YouTube, go check him out. He just dropped a new video about the 500 free and Rex Maurer's 404, which I enjoyed watching. So go check him out on YouTube if you haven't watched his videos. David, how's it going?
Oh, it's fantastic. Just, it feels like we just exist in this state between breakdowns where swimming news happens and it's like, got to talk about that, got to talk about that, got to talk about that. As we, if you missed the last one, we did a mid-season breakdown, and we're right in between prelims and finals of some meets. And then after that, we had a lot of action to wrap up the first, and it feels like most of the mid-seasons.
Seriously, yeah. I mean, it was a weird format this year, not only because a lot of the meets were Wednesday to Friday, or maybe even like Tuesday evening to Friday, but then, or maybe like half the meets were that. The other half were the normal like Thursday to Saturday format or Wednesday night to Saturday. But then you had Golden Goggles in Indianapolis, where I don't think it's ever been before, on Saturday night. So really just like a lot going on. But it was a weekend full of swimming highlights, full of historic swims. And that's what we're going to get into first, as well as Golden Goggles, which again was on Saturday night. We're getting a lot of comments already, which I love. Someone's telling me to put the fries in the bag. I honestly don't know what that means, but I like it. I think it's a compliment. So
it's a common thing people say on like TikTok and comments and stuff.
I'll take it. I'll put the fries in. We're about to put the wet, soggy, chlorinated fries in the bag.
Yum.
So let's start off in Knoxville, Tennessee, where on the last final session on Friday night, hours after we had our mid-season breakdown, we saw two more fastest ever swims in history. Claire Curzan and Gretchen Walsh were in the super final. If you didn't know, at the Tennessee Invite, they had C finals, B finals. I think they had DC. The B final was like number 2 through 8 out of prelims, so it was 6 swimmers, and then the A final was like a super final where it was just 2 swimmers mano a mano going at it, which I thought was kind of fun. And that seems like a very Todd DeSorbo thing to do, and I'm guessing he maybe had an influence in getting the meet format the way it was. But Gretchen Walsh and Claire Curzan faced off in the 200 backstroke, which was awesome. Claire Curzan, 146.87, new American US NCAA record. David, thoughts on this? I mean, I certainly didn't see this coming. Claire is defending NCAA champion from 2 years ago, but I didn't see this coming from her at this time, but kudos to Miss Curzan.
I mean, I didn't see it coming either. And the fun thing is that we cannot pretend like we saw it coming, because we played the prediction game about Gretchen Walsh and what she was going to go when she was definitely going to win this event. And, that was just a phenomenal swim. That was awesome to see that. Mm-hmm. And I talking about the super final format, I think that's a really cool way to do it. Like you said, I think that's definitely a Todd DeSorbo input there, because was it the UVA Texas meet, was it last year where they did that? And that was
in Virginia.
Yeah, and they called that same name, super final. And I think this is a good way to do it, where you don't need to determine it ahead of time. It's based off of the prelims results, whereas that, since it's a dual meet, it was just like put your best swimmer into this super final and kind of see what you want to do. Fun way to do it, easy, low stakes way to kind of add some extra excitement at a mid-season meet, where a big championship meet can maybe get a little monotonous as a viewer if you're not fully locked into the swimming results all the time. But going to that actual swim there, I think it's really cool to kind of see how the two of them battle that out with Gretchen Walsh. Obviously is going to have some phenomenal opening speed, and she had the lead at the 100, and then it immediately started getting outsplit by a full half second on that third 50 by Claire, and then just by over a second on the last 50, 27.5 to 28.8. As
Oh,
that showed that, oh
gotta
yeah,
love it.
she's 200 back. And I mean, at 148.1 for Gretchen Walsh, we can't gloss over that. It's going to look a little slower when you're next to a 146.8. And now the nice thing is that the record books are a bit more streamlined. We don't have this American record from Regan Smith outside of the NCAA and then the NCAA record. They're the same record now, which I'm always a fan of. It's the same way I feel when a world junior record that's like not the fastest junior swim gets broken. Like, where it's like, oh, this swim was actually like 2 years before they started tracking it. That same kind of like, okay, the record books are the same.
Aligned.
But yeah, that strong back half, and I think we're really seeing some good. I mean, Claire training there at UVA is clearly working.
And I mean, again, you never know what's going on with someone personally. I certainly don't know what Claire Curzan's life looks like outside of the pool. But last year, she was a big transition for her. She was at Stanford for 1 year and then went to Virginia. And so it's like, that's a lot of change and a lot of that. Leave it at that. It's a lot of change over a couple of years. And last year, she didn't have a bad season of swimming. I think people can look at it and say, "Oh, it wasn't a very good season," but she got third at Olympic trials. She didn't make the Olympic team, but she did have a good season where I think she went multiple best times in at least backstroke events. She won a couple world titles at the Doha World Champs. It's like, so we've seen good things coming from Claire Curzan out of Virginia, but I think this certainly puts a stamp on that, that something's working in Charlottesville for Claire Curzan, which is always great to see. If you called Gretchen Walsh going 148 low in the 200 back, throw it in the comments, because that is exactly what she did. It's a great time. She is now the number 9 performer all time. Would have won NCAAs last year with that time. And it also cleared the old Virginia and ACC records that Claire, broke second, 1.5 seconds before Gretchen. But it's like, she went pretty fast too.
Where does the 2 back fall in terms of Gretchen's best events?
That's a good, I mean, if we're going short course yards and not including the 100 IM, because it's not an NCAA event, I mean, 50 free, 100 free, 100 back, 100 fly, 200 free or 200 back. What do you think? Which do you think would be a better event?
Well, I get, gosh, because what did
Hard to
she
say.
go last year on that 8 free relay?
130. I think that's a men's time. 140 low.
That
like
sounds
140
right.
point low. I'm pretty certain. Like, she almost went 139.
Yeah, that sounds very familiar. What?
So it's like,
here's how I'm going to determine it. I'm going to look
at yeah. Commenters, what's a better event for Gretchen, 2 back or 2 free?
Well, see, this doesn't help me because I was comparing it to the winning time, and that was a 140.9. So like, it's still in the same. Would have won, and like, like a little, like, not like blowout like her other event. So I think it might just be a tie for 5th best. But
yeah,
when you're okay, at the very least, her top 6 events, because even if you tie those, are potential NCAA winning swims.
Yeah, she could win. She could win in 6 events.
That's crazy. Remove the event limit.
Yeah, that is nuts. That would be fun to see. We have some people in the comments. Someone saying, "What will Rex Maurer go at NCAAs in the 500 free this year after that 4:04.4?" They're saying 4:01.84 for an NCAA record. I don't know if I can get behind that prediction. I
I
could. I, I can't see him going that much faster.
That's quick. The opening I would give for him to have that big of a drop is something I touched on during our last breakdown, is the fact that if this was a surprise for him and for Bowman, and if he was pacing maybe a little more conservatively compared to what he's able to go out in and still come back really fast, if
Mm-hmm.
he's okay, this is what I practiced during my training, and then he hit that 350 400 mark and went, oh wait, I'm not tired yet, and then took off and like could play with this, basically opening up the availability to go out a bit faster on the front end. And now that you know what you're capable of in something like that, that is like the one avenue I would give. That's a big drop for playing around with splits, though. I do think that he has the potential to, especially if he's got, I expect Luke Hobson's going to be nice and quick during NCAAs. He, is not super fast outside in midseason, outside of his like freshman year. It was like the only time he was like crazy fast at midseason, and then he's like he was a 415 at midseason last year, 412 this year. So he's trending in the right direction. And then obviously last year he went a 406, so he was good to go by the end of the year.
He went a 406 and looked slow doing it, which is nuts.
Yeah, that's crazy. It's like I went back to watch that. I'm like, okay, there's Marchand. Oh, hey, there's Hobson. He's one of the only people to ever break 407. There he goes. I
Seriously.
do think that there's room for him to drop a bit. I could see him hitting, maybe in the 403s. I think a 401 is going to be, maybe by his senior year, I'd revisit that 401 prediction. I think in 1 year, he just dropped 7
A
seconds.
lot. Yeah. His best was 411.
Yep.
Coming into this season, was his best 411 or 412?
It was also 411. He dropped like half a second at the Texas Indiana meet. He was 412 in high school. He went like a 411.8 in at Stanford, and then a 411 like 20 at Texas Indiana.
Gotcha.
I still have those numbers in my head from the video I did on it. So I like wrote them down and spoke them. So now they're like locked in there for the next week.
Yeah. So he just dropped 7.5 seconds, which is so much.
Insane.
And that's like he's got a best time in that event every year for the last 3 years, I think.
That's hard to do.
Yeah, it's like high school, Stanford, now Texas. So it's like it dropping another 2.5 would be a lot. Maybe he goes 403, but again, NCAAs is sometimes not the best meet to go best times at. Sometimes you do, but especially if you're coming off of like such a big high like that, I don't know. I would not predict 401. But if he does, that'd be awesome.
I'm not going to complain.
Yeah. No kidding. But there we did see another fastest time of all time. Jordan Crooks split 39.89, anchoring Tennessee's 400 free relay. The only man to split 39 in 100 free on a relay. And now he is with Dressel as the only man to ever go 39 in 100 free. And he's the fastest one to do it, technically. Pretty, dude, that guy had a heck of a midseason.
Oh, yeah. That was, I mean, everything he did was just out of this world at this meet. I don't think he had, I can't really think of, I don't think he had a single off swim that I can think of, because he was incredible on relays. Obviously, we talked about this last time. He got like the mid-season madness started and kicked off that trend of the fastest mid-season time ever. Because even in events that weren't NCAA records, we kept seeing things, going back to what we just talked about, that 500 free, fastest midseason time ever, even if it's not the fastest ever, or things like, a 49 and 100 breaststroke. That doesn't happen at this time, 200 free, 130.00, beautiful time to look at, nice and round there. And then he was throwing down, I think 17 whatever on the 200 medley relay was like remarkably consistent in leading off the 200 free relay, and then in the 50 free later on in the meets, like, like 18 point, like 12 and 14 or 14 and 16, like remarkably close
Yeah.
between those, and fast, and also faster than he was at midseason last year. Yeah, I think he break 44 seconds in the 100 fly too, I think.
I believe he was 43.7,
Yeah, which
I wanna
is, and I
say.
think that was his first time under 44, which was,
Oh,
I
ever?
mean, I think so. I feel I don't actually
Dang.
know that 100% off the top of my head, but that sounds like something that lived in my brain at one point.
Yeah.
And he also went a 40 point, what was it, 26 on that 100 free, which is one of the fastest ever. And
Mm,
it's also one of those things that you look at it and go, oh, and two 100s behind him is Leon Marchand, because I feel like we kind of forgot that he went that fast in the
right.
conference relay because it's short course. And yeah,
Yeah.
but that is, I mean, there's just so many just all-time fast swims, just, from someone who has been so fast in the past, who we've seen is able to, you know, go fast at SECs and go fast at NCAAs, and is one of is the second person to ever break 18 in that 50 free from a flat start. It's very fitting for him to join Dressel with that with a sub 40-second swim, even though this one's with a relay swing. And just like I was talking about with like the records in that two back, finally we got that all-time fastest relay split back to being faster than the individual. Might be by a
Seriously.
hundredth, but it's
Yeah.
faster.
We'll take it. He also split 17.5,
That's what it was, yeah.
anchoring the 200 medley relay. Yeah, I mean, he just every single swim was sensational, uh, and it's kind of leaves you flabbergasted. It's really cool to see some of the seniors this year really showing out, like Jordan Crooks, like Gretchen Walsh, because uh, because this year is the last year of COVID fifth years. And so the seniors this year, the true seniors like Gretchen and Jordan, they're done after this year. Like there's no, oh, will they be back? Will they do grad school? Like that's it. And so it's really interesting to see how some of them are reacting to that. And it's crazy to see how these generational talents who have rewritten record books and Jordan Crooks is, like you said, the first guy since Dressel to go under 18 seconds in a 50 free. He very well could be the first guy since Dressel to go 39 in a 100 free from a flat start, come conference or NCAAs. But it is clear that they are trying to leave their stamp on NCAA swimming, and it is clear that they have gotten better since last year when they are already so good. And that is really exciting to see because, again, it is just November and they are already going so fast.
Actually, you briefly touched on something that kind of got me thinking. Mentioning this being the last year of the COVID fifth years, and I'm very curious, kind of thinking to next season. I wonder how much, if any, like depth will lose at that top end level, because normally, any given year you lose one class and then you replace them with the new freshmen, and then some of the juniors are improving. You kind of
Mhm.
you lose a class of swimmers, you gain a class. We're effectively losing, obviously it's not, it probably is closer to like 1.5 based on how many people actually choose to take
Yeah.
a fifth year, but like two graduating classes of like potential fifth years, and then also just your true seniors are both going to be out of the mix after this season. So this might be that, it might be something that's going to be interesting for some nerds to look back at as like the overall historical trends of like the 16th and 8th fastest times out of prelims or whatever, to kind of try and judge our depth.
Oh, agreed.
So that'll be
Especially,
interesting.
yeah, especially at NCAAs, like
Yeah.
how many fifth years will be getting second swims or be used on scoring relays, because there are certainly a few that come to mind just off the top of my head that will be very influential. I know Abby Aarons, who was at NC State and is now at Texas. She's already broken school records on relays at Texas. Um, Alex Walsh, obviously, we haven't seen her compete yet, but I believe she is confirmed to compete at Short Course Worlds and is taking the 5th year, and we'll probably see her swimming for UVA this spring. So it's like there'll be some heavy hitters, and it will be really interesting to see how things shake up next year, just in terms of depth. I like that point a lot. So those were the highlights from the Tennessee invite. Going over to the NC State invite in Greensboro, another historic swim. Ilya Kharun split 1889 in the 50 fly, fastest 50 fly split of ever, which is, on one hand, I'm like, oh, that's it. Like, that's the fastest 50 fly. I thought it was like a little bit faster, honestly, because like 19 in a 50 fly had been so normalized to me at this point. But then also you're like, oh, if someone splits an 18.8 on a 200 free relay doing freestyle, like that's actually pretty good. And Ilya was doing fly. So kudos to him. He had a heck of a meet as well. He's had a heck of a season. He's been going extremely fast all year. But he has thrown it down. And we also saw maybe something on the other end of the spectrum where ASU's 800 free relay was DQ'd because someone left a 50 early. Like, the guy flipped at the 150, but I guess the person on the block didn't realize it, and then he just dove in.
That is, I think so many swimmers saw that and was like, my biggest nightmare. Because I was always so stressed about doing that. I always stressed out about miscounting individual 200 frees. Or any 200,
which is a very real thing, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen it happen a few times, but it always lucks out, and it's like the last swimmer, like in the A free. Like, who was it? And like a stand, I don't remember who was
40.
anchoring. Yes,
40.
Who were, it's like, oh man, they set the record for the 850 free relay. And it's, things like that. And I'm very glad that it looks like they didn't like collide. It looks like there was at least enough distance either out or they weren't out there. And it's really interesting. SwimSwam posted the video on Instagram. If you just saw the results, I'd recommend watching it because I don't know what team is next to them. That other swimmer also almost does it. And so I don't know who got on the block first. I imagine is the reason why one of them saw, oh crap, this guy must be right. I don't want to miss it. And he actually goes to start, but he sees his teammate flip. He sees his legs come out and stops. He manages to keep his feet on the block and not false start. And then basically ends up, depending on who started it, potentially psyching, throwing off the ASU swimmer who then goes in. And just that it reminds me of, I don't remember what country's Olympic trials this was over the summer, but when we saw that snafu with the 200 IM where one swimmer went underneath the lane line and swam freestyle behind another swimmer that. I think it was, I don't remember what country it was, but someone, they clearly just slid under a lane line during their breast to freestyle turn in the in the 200 IM, and they ended up swimming behind this other swimmer. There's two swimmers in lane 7 now. And I talked about that. And with this same thing, it's all these little mistakes that happen, they can happen at any level. It's an easy mistake to make. And it reminds me of, something like this. ASU actually also DQ'd their 400 free relay with just a traditional false start, not anything quite as extravagant. And it's things like that. You know what? Better mid-season than NCAAs.
Yeah.
You'd much rather not win the mid-season meet relay than to lose all those points to NCAAs or lose out on your hopeful fastest swim of the year. And you know what? He's probably not going to do it again. The coach is probably going to tell him, hey, you swim before him. You are are after him or whatever. You're the lead off. You're the most clear headed at this point. Your lactate is starting to get out. You are head counter now. You're making sure everyone is keeping count. There. I do not see that mistake happening again. And if it does, that might be a new record of some kind.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think, once bitten, right? It's like,
Yeah.
okay, I did it. I learned from it. I think moving forward, they will be a little safer. I mean, uh, I think relay DQs in the traditional sense, like what happened to ASU men in the 400 free relay, like that's always gonna happen because, they're performing at an elite level and they're trying to get the quickest starts they can, but in an 800 free relay, I feel like you have enough time to where it's just like, just see the person finish or, it's like, like you could just sit there if you're especially if you're unsure of
You
if
can
it's
make it up
time
in
to
the
go or
water.
not. Yeah, it's like, oh, they flipped? Yeah, okay, I don't go. Or it's like, oh, they didn't they touched. Okay, now I'm gonna go. Uh, because it's an 800 free relay, but mistakes happen. I think this is one of the most relatable swimmer things that could happen is
Yeah.
miscounting a 200
Y
because if you're a swimmer and you say you haven't done it, you have.
At the very least in practice.
You're right. Yeah.
The amount of times where it's like, "Oh, look at that guy. He's doing a 250. Oh, I only did a 150? Crap." Actually, I
Yeah.
was normally the guy swimming at 250. I normally overcounted. And also, talking about, Ilya and that 50 fly split,
Mm,
go back to a very successful, ASU relay. You mentioned that is, "Oh, that's a really fast freestyle split." So ASU in that 200 free relay, they went, 1:13.93,
mhm.
one of the fastest relays in history and the current NCAA leading time. Their slowest split was an 18:81.
Ilya's giving him some competition.
Like
But,
that is how
yeah.
fat, and that would have been, NC State had they were second, then 18:9 and 18:8 and let off with an like in fact that would have been their fastest split was an 18:7 for NC State.
I mean, like, yeah, and just thinking about it, we wrote the article of ASU had 7 men who split 19-0 or better. Like, now you could throw Ilya's 50 fly split into that mix, right, of 19-0 or better. So yeah, just pretty all around crazy. Way to go, Ilya Kharun. Way to go, ASU men. They are doing it on the sprint depth.
It's so fun to watch that sprint crew just do work.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was those were the historic swims from the second half of the midseason weekend. I mean, we had 5, I got 6 swims that were the fastest of all time. When you take into account Carson and Rex's 500 freeze, Gretchen Walsh's 100 fly, Claire Curzan's 200 back, Jordan Crooks' 100 free, and Ilya Karun's 50 fly. 6 swims that were the fastest of all time in whatever category they had. I guess Rex and Carson's 500s were American records, but I mean, really sensational stuff for the middle of the season. So it's like now it's just like even January, I feel like is going to be so quick. I mean, last year in January, I know the highlight meet for me was Cal ASU, and that meet I think was the fastest dual meet of all time.
Oh, probably.
uh, so we have Texas ASU, Virginia, NC State coming up this January, which I think will be a heck of a meet.
And we already had Texas, Indiana. That was already a crazy sampler of
Hmm.
2 other teams that are going to be in contention for that team title at the end. And it's always fun. We can kind of get these more head-to-head competition throughout the season.
You know what we should start doing? And I'm sure I'm not the first person to mention this or say this or think this. We should have dual meet records. And like SwimSwam does write an article, when Gretchen Walsh goes the fastest meet in season time ever. But, it's like, uh, especially because we're suiting for dual meets now, like I feel like that would be a cool thing to like start keeping track of. Uh, especially like mid seasons wouldn't count because it's an invite. Like it just one day dual meets because they are a different format. But I feel like that would be really fun to track. And then, you could break a dual meet record in January.
Yeah, I would support that. And then it's also one of those things where people are like, well, what if you just go for the dual meet records and you taper for that? Well, it's like, okay, let them. Like, there's no, if they want to do that,
Yeah.
cool. Like, I don't think any coaches are going to be like, all right, guys, we're going all in for trying to break some dual meet records on here. Unless
Yeah.
you think that would work for your program, unless you think that would make your athletic director really happy, in which case, do that.
Well,
But I think that's just a cool, like, I enjoy like the very specific record keeping things like that. And it would be cool to kind of keep more of like a running and kind of, and it might be a fun, like just historical dive to see what was the fast like that. Cause when, like you mentioned, Gretchen Walsh does a fast time, it's relatively easy to reverse engineer when the only person who's been faster is herself. And you're like NCAAs, ACCs, ACCs, that swim. Okay. That was easy.
right. Yeah. But yeah, there are certainly other swims where it's like, oh, there have been a lot of people who've been around this time, but it was all at a conference championship or at NCAAs. Like no one's been this fast in November or, in September. And also, I just think that's the direction we're going as a sport, right? Like more and more people are suiting up for dual meets. More and more people are starting to swim very, very fast in season. And I think that generates more excitement, which is obviously good for the sport. It's good for the college side of swimming. Uh, and I think that could, that could be one way to generate excitement and get people interested in watching is like, hey, we're going to try to make the fastest dual meet in history, or like, we're going to try to break this dual meet record at this meet. Because even like Virginia last year, tried to break the 800 free relay NCAA record at ACCs because they knew that they weren't going to put Gretchen on that relay at NCAAs because it just didn't make sense points wise, right? Or they didn't want her to start the meet with a 200 freestyle. So different meets have different purposes, right? Like NCAAs, you're trying to go there and score the most points. Like at a dual meet or even at a conference championships, if you're a Virginia, like you have some wiggle room to where we're going to score the points we need to regardless because we're so deep. So maybe this meet we can go for X record, in the case of ACCs last year, the 800 free relay. And so you could do the same thing at dual meets too if you're a team that swims fast all year.
Yeah. I mean, I support swimming fast all year, and anything that can help motivate people to do that, I am game for.
But anyway, if someone wants to keep track of dual meet records, you'd be the goat of record keeping. So just throwing that out there into the universe. Let's transition to outside the pool, but still swimming. We had Golden Goggles on Saturday night in Indianapolis. I'm gonna go through just quickly a list of the winners. Breakout performer of the year was Gretchen Walsh. The male race of the year was Bobby Fink's 1500 to win Olympic gold. Female race of the year, Tori Husk's 100 fly gold. Alumni of the year, which is a brand new award, everyone's favorite, Rowdy Gaines. Relay performance of the year was the women's 4x100 medley relay. Perseverance award was Paige Madden. Open water swimmer of the year was Katie Grimes. Coach of the year was Todd DeSorbo. And then we had the big ones, male and female athlete of the year were Bobby Fink and Tori Husk. I am curious, David, what you think of those awards, male and female of the year, going to Bobby Fink and Tori Husk.
I think Bobby Fink feels like a pretty obvious choice there, right? The fact that he was the individual gold medalist and setting a world record. It's pretty hard to beat that, especially because we know that the way Golden Goggles typically works is just going to be all pointed towards the big meet at for whatever year, whether it's a world championships or an Olympics. It's like it's basically even though it's the 2024 Golden Goggles, it's the Paris Olympics Golden Goggles. Because I know less so this year, especially for Bobby Fink there. I think no matter what, that could probably trumps it there. But if we go to the female athlete of the year, I think that one, I think Tori Husk is a good choice for it there. I think it's easier to argue for other candidates. Like you could also say, what about Gretchen Walsh setting the the 100 fly world record at Olympic trials? But then Tori Husk beats her at the Olympics, so I would say that that's a point there. I think the main argument you could make for against Tori Husk for the female athlete of the year would be Katie Ledecky,
right?
Because it's Katie Ledecky, and at that point it's kind of,
and she won 2 gold medals. Tori won individually. Tori won 1 gold medal.
Yeah. But then how does that stack up to your relay performances, especially if you've got a world record relay on there? Actually, was she on the mixed medley?
She was on the mixed medley.
2 world record setting relays.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of looking at that in totality, I think the world records on the relays, that might be enough for me to push her past Kaylee Ledecky. I could still see the argument for it, especially because it's kind of like a lot of these awards in any sports, whether you're talking about the greatest of all time or the greatest performer of the year, it just comes down to counting. How many medals did you win? How many individuals medal in? And it kind of depends on what you want to count, right? Do you want to count world records? Do you want to count relay medals? Do you want to count individual medals? If you count individual medals, it's Ledecky. But if you count like the totality of everything and including relay performance, I'd say you give it to Husk. And it seems like that's the route they went. And so I don't think it's a snub of anyone.
I also think it's funny that like this of all Olympics, Katie Ledecky becomes the winningest Olympian ever in swimming, tied with Emma McKeon at 14 medals, aside from Michael Phelps. Winningest female ever, but she's not swimmer of the year. And I agree. I mean, I agree with it. At first glance, I was kind of like, Katie Ledecky, 2 gold medals individually. Tori Husk, 1 gold medal individually. Like, again, it's like, what do you want to count? And at first I was like, well, that count seems obvious. But then you look a little deeper and, Katie Ledecky won 4 medals, 2 gold, an individual bronze, and then a silver on the 800 free relay. Tori Husk was splitting 51s like it was her freaking job. I think she, on the 400 free relay, she was 52.0. And then medley relay, she was 52.4. Mixed medley, she was 51.8. I'm sorry. So she was 51. She split 51 once, but she was so reliable throughout all of her 100 free duties. And then she won individual silver in the 100 free, individual gold in the 100 fly. I mean, I do think that overall her performance at the Olympics was greater than Ledecky's, especially when you take into account 2 world records in the medley and mixed medley relay. But then also, I just think it's interesting that like for World Aquatics Swimmer of the Year, Mel has he puts forth nominations for those athletes. And so we were talking about that the other day. They go like when they ask people for nominations, they're like, here's the math we use. Here's what we count. 45% is Olympics. 45% is Doha World Championships. 10% is World Cup. So that struck me as like very interesting because then you're weighing the Olympics and the Doha World Championships equally. So it's like, well, Claire Curzan won 3 gold medals in Doha. I think I'm pretty sure she swept the backstrokes, or she certainly won 2.
Yeah, she at least won 2. I think you're right. I think it was a sweep.
So it's like,
Ledecky didn't win any gold medals in Doha.
Exactly. It's like Claire Curzan, on paper has more gold medals this year than Katie Ledecky. So it's like, so she could definitely be nominated. It's like, it's things like that where it's like, oh, this isn't as straightforward as one might think. And it's interesting. It makes sense for USA Swimming to only look at the Olympics because that is all they care about. Like, they sent a team to Doha, but that's not their focus, right? And they sent people to people went to World Cup who were American, but that's not their focus. Like, they only care about that. So it makes sense that Golden Goggles should go to the performers from the Olympics. But I think it would be nice if USA Swimming put a little more emphasis on other meets besides like the one meet a year, or like maybe that got factored in a little more to Golden Goggles. Maybe give Doha 20% something versus like Olympics 80% or something like that.
Yeah, or
But
you lean the other way and just like act like the joke I made, just like put it in the name, just be like make it, because I feel like there's so much argument
yeah.
that happens about like, why did you tell us they did this? It's like, well, they're only talking about the Paris Olympics. Well, where does it say that?
Yeah.
And it does also make sense that World Aquatics would want to equally weigh those, because it's like it's their events and they don't want to overvalue, especially when whatever host nations are paying whatever amount. They want to be like, yeah, but you had a crappy World Championships. You had this extra one or something like that. So it makes sense that they would do it that way, but it is definitely, I wonder how many people like strictly followed that or were able to like remove their own personal baggage. I feel like even if you're told that, it's very easily to be like, but it's the Olympics.
Right.
Like, it's very, even if you like have that in your mind, you're like, I'm supposed to be weighing them equally.
Yeah.
But you might just like subconsciously pull towards the Paris results and kind of weigh that a bit more heavily.
I mean, exactly. And that's like, I like your idea of just say it in the award, like, and for female Olympic swimmer of the year, right? Or like female world championship swimmer of the year. Cause it's not like, it doesn't really encapsulate the year. It encapsulates one meet, which is why, it's like in the NBA, you have the regular season MVP, and then they do the playoffs, and then you have the finals MVP. And it's like, those are two very different things, right? Like, the MVP it would be, in my eyes, like the swimmer of the year, like the person who had the best overall year of swimming. And that, I think that it would be cool to have some kind of award for like that. And it, like, World Aquatics is much closer to that, right? Because they're looking at 3 different meets across the whole year, or 3 different events.
It'd be cool if they added an award that was like, I don't know what you call it, like, like maybe like consistency or something. It's like the swimmer who was like, or like, maybe also putting an emphasis on like in-season performance, right? Like kind of give a shout out to those swimmers who are like we kind of generally know
the Iron
this
Lady
swimmer's
Award.
fast in season. Oh yeah. Like this swimmer's fast in season. This swimmer sucks in season, and they're gonna drop like 10 seconds in 100 somehow.
The anti-Ryan Lochte Award.
Oh my god, yeah. Yeah, it's presented by Ryan Lochte and Townley Haas.
Exactly. Yeah. But like, I do think that when you, again, like, thinking of ways to grow swimming, like, if they had that, if you put more of an emphasis on the regular season, like lots of other sports do, then like people care more, and like fans care more, right? Like, people are going to be more intrigued to watch than just once every 4 years or once a year. But anyway, as in terms of Golden Goggles this year right now, yeah, I think the choices are great. And on that note, that's what happened this weekend. So let's round everything out with some sink or swims. First up today on sink or swim, at both NCAA championship meets in March that will be in Federal Way, Washington, men's and women's meets, there will be 36 events total. Sink or swim, we will see 20 US Open records go down. This is more of an over-under, but 19 and a half over or under.
Does it count if a record gets broken multiple times?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess I think it does. Yeah.
That makes me closer. I think I'm going to sink it though, because I think that we have like we kind of touched on earlier talking about the 500, is that it can be hard to go your absolute fastest and chase records at NCAAs, especially with like on the men's side, with how high pressure and intense we're expecting that team race to be. I think there's going to be a lot more of, like it's going to be a lot more about the points rather than just the time. And some of those records are getting fast. We're trying to sweep
So
multiple,
fast.
and I think some of those records, this is something I talk about a lot actually with Dressel's 50 free record, is it's even harder to break that than it looks like on the surface, because when he went 17.63, second place was 18.64. He had over a full second on held. So he's not in that wash. If Liendo and Crooks are both going 18.0s right next to each other, like that's why I always put forth why Crooks has both his 17 second swims have come from SECs when he doesn't have this tight field around him. And now you have 18.0, 18.0, 18.1, 18.2, all right by each other, all just throwing that water around, things like that, where I feel like the depth is rising up really rapidly in the last couple of years. And then the some records that are still stand up today, but they were maybe set when the depth was a little further back. And so they kind of had a little more advantages of clean water, which in short course yards, especially in the sprintier events, can be kind of nuts. Because otherwise that line is basically saying over half. So at least every other event, more than every other event, you'd be having records go down. That seems a touch steep. I think there's with the question I asked at the start about whether or not them being broken multiple times counts, that kind of that brings it closer, where I could see it definitely getting under the wire by the last day, especially if, Gretchen Walsh does, like breaks a couple events in prelims and finals or something like that, or on a relay, like we saw with the men's 200 free last year, leads off the relay and then, breaks in the individual. Or I guess we saw 3 200 free records last year because it's Hobson, Marchand, Hobson. But, I think it's going to be close. I'm going to sink it.
Yeah. I wrote this and I was like, yeah, that'll be like, I think it's close. I mean, this is the fastest November ever. And this is what prompted this question, but like, we're certainly on pace for a historic NCAAs where potentially a lot of records could get broken. I mean, just looking at the results from midseason, some already did get broken. Some were like way closer than we've ever seen at this point in the season. So it's like, if you look at the graph, yeah, it's certainly possible that we could see 20 plus US Open records get broken out of the 36 swum events at NCAAs. I mean, I think I have to sink it because more than every other event would be so many, but I think it'll be right at that line.
It's a good line.
I'm sinking it with the caveat that one of Caleb Dressel's records is going down. Whether it's SECs or NCAAs, one of those records is getting broken this year because, I mean,
he's had it too good for too long.
Crooks has already been 40.2. He like between Liendo, Crooks, and Ilya Kharun, honestly, like one of those guys is gonna be faster than one of those times. It's happening. I'm positive.
I think the first one to go is going to be that 100 free, because Dressel is way more fatigued than these guys are, because he had to do prelims and finals of his relays. He didn't get to do time finals. And he even said, like, the first thing he said after he went 39.9 was, I'm tired.
Agreed. Yeah. I mean, I think that is the easiest. Like, I think about a lot, like, what if the 100 free was on day one, right? And like, where would it be at this point? Like, would we have seen a 39.3 yet? Like, I think it's possible because NCAAs, even though it's a shorter meet now than it ever has been, and there's less swims than there ever has been, it's still a long meet and with a lot of emotional energy output from these athletes. So anyway, that's going to happen. Mark my words. Book it. All right. Next up, we got to talk about the team battles on the men's side. Sink or swim. After seeing Texas do what they did this weekend, Texas men win NCAAs.
I am going to swim it if they have Chris Giuliano on the roster by that point,
Yeah.
because I believe it seemed like, I don't think it's 100% confirmed. Like, I know like that he'll be able to compete this season. It sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong here, that like the reasonable pathway for him to be able to do that is that he graduates from Notre Dame this fall. Cause I think he said like in his like post, like he's planning to graduate from there. So I think he would graduate in the fall, and then he would be like a graduate transfer to Texas for the spring semester. And then that, since he's transferring, it'd be different. You wouldn't need like sit out a season, because he graduated for the
Yeah.
transfer. He wouldn't need to like sit out a season or anything like that. I believe that's the predicted pathway he's going to go about, as like the way that he would compete for Texas this year. I'm not 100% sure if that's confirmed or if that's like his only path forward, but it sounds like, from what I've heard, that seems like what most people think his plan is going to be. So it seems like there's a reasonable pathway for him to be able to compete. And I think that not only is he a 40-point athlete that you could just drop in there,
At least.
the way that he can impact those relays is insane. I did after that was announced, I did a video breaking down just plopping him in to Texas's relays from last year, not assuming any kind of improvements that we see in their other athletes that and other additions, just the results last year. Take Giuliano in there and like throw in like what he was splitting at that meet. And he is jumping some of these relays up from like out of scoring, like, and the 200 free relay didn't even score. And it's like, oh, they're in like the middle of the B final now from just one swimmer in there. And then also the fact that, well, hey, if you don't, have Luke Hobson on one of these relays, you can put him in there with them on the 200 free relay, bump it even higher. Or, he would only improve them by one spot on the 400 medley relay. Now you can put Hobson on that, or no, both of them on the 8 free relay or something like that. And then you can just juice that one as much as you want to. And I just think that relay impact with just him would already be so many points. His individual points are going to be crazy. And then I think that's also going to really help build in like momentum for the team. And just with everything else we've seen, Texas and Indiana as a dual meet was already like, oh man, this is dangerous. And then seeing things like 404 is just like, man, they rebuilt real quick.
Man, no kidding. Yeah, they are looking good. So this question is basically Texas or the field. I'm going to take the field. I'm going to sink it. I've been consistent with this, I believe, but I think it'll take 1 year, And honestly, as a swim fan, it's like it would I would like to see parity, and I would also just like to see Indiana win for a
I
team
would
that
love to
hasn't
see them
won
win.
in a long, long time. And talking to Ray Lewis just recently, like he's like, that's the last. I've pretty much accomplished everything else as a coach aside from winning an NCAA team title, and it would be really cool. But I think Indiana has a chance. I think Cal has a chance, and I think between those two teams, it would be so crazy to see Bob Bowman go somewhere and then the first year they win an NCAA team title. And so I'm not convinced yet. Maybe after SECs I will be, but I'm not quite there yet.
I normally when I'm presented with a choice of like this swimmer or this team or the field, I normally go with the field. It is purely that like still riding that high from the Texas Invitational, and then that Giuliano X factor is like, that's why it's hinging like, if they have Giuliano, if they don't have him, then I would be on the same page as you and be like, I'd give it to the field. Like, there's too many teams that have a chance to say that any one team is the overwhelming favorite.
I mean, absolutely, he's huge. Chris Giuliano is a big piece to gain for that Texas men's team, without a doubt. Going over to the women's side, we saw we saw what UVA has this weekend. We also saw what the defending second place Texas women have this weekend, as well as the Stanford women, as well as the Tennessee women. So sink or swim, the women's meet will be within 40 points this year.
Let's see. Now, I'm assuming with no relay disqualifications. That'd do it.
Yeah,
That'd do
obviously.
it. Because I'm looking at what it was. It was like, gosh, they won by so much last year.
They won by like over 100, I think. Or no,
Yeah,
80,
it's
80, 80 something.
80 something. Yes, I'm like doing this like awkward math. Looking at the
Yeah.
score. Yeah, it's 527 to 441 over Texas.
Yeah.
Are they down? I'm gonna sink it. I think that they're gonna hold on to at least a 40-point lead, just because I was kind of teetering, but then we haven't even seen Alex Walsh yet, and if she's in that mix too, that's some points. And with Claire Curzan being as fast already as she is, and then you throw all those fast swims, Gretchen Walsh is still in there. Those are some killer relays, and they just seem to be having like key pieces going fast where they need to, when they need to. I think they can hold on to. They're not going to win by as much, but I think they can hold on to 40 points. Because I was kind of looking at like, are they going to score 50 points less or over 50 points less than last year? I don't know if they're beat out quite that many, or if Texas is going to find quite that many. Who I am at least assuming is going to be in that number 2 spot.
Agreed. Yeah, I think Texas is going to find more points than they did last year, especially assuming they have diving. Always a factor. But I do think UVA's still got a whole lot of studs and like multiple event studs. I mean, the Walsh sisters, Curzan, Amy Canny, like Leah Hayes.
Oh yeah, Dave.
Yeah, I mean, like
her.
that's just like 5 off the top who have a very good shot at scoring in 2+ events. Yeah, and
a lot of those are relay factors
powerful.
too. Like a lot of those are on relay events.
Yeah. So I thought I was gonna swim it. I just gonna sink it.
I was close, and then I remembered that we haven't even seen that. I remember Alex Walsh will probably be there too, because I was kind of going off of like just the most recent results. So I'm like, oh wait, there's like this X factor hanging out. It's like the same thing with Giuliano for Texas.
It's next year is gonna be so interesting. Oh, because there won't be any Walshes. And honestly, nothing against them. They just feel like a cheat code. I love the Walsh sisters, but like they're just so fast.
Like the highest compliment. It's like, hey, you're too good.
Yeah. So it'll be really, obviously UVA will be quite good, but I think they will come back down to earth, at least some. But as for this year, doesn't look like it. All right. This isn't even. This is just a sink, not a swim. Which record on the men or women's side? Which NCAA record do you want to see go down the most?
I like the way you worded that in there. Which one do you want to get sunk?
Yeah. Which record do you want to see sunk?
That made me laugh when I saw it in the email. So this one's actually it's 2 that I want to go down, not together because it would not be any overlap, but it's for one specific reason. So you mentioned that you think a Dressel record's going to go down this year. I'm not going to pick a Dressel record. I want the men's 1,000 free to somehow get broken. If someone can go fast enough or go fast at a dual meet or something, because it's an awkward event,
right?
Like to have in there. And unless you're in Division 2, I swam D2 and I love the 1,000s, my favorite event. And we should bring it into D1 and D3. Or that one, and this one has a much higher chance of it, the men's 200 fly. That seems like an odd pairing, and especially when I mentioned Caleb Dressel. The reason is because I believe those are the only two men's NCAA records that are older than 17.6. And I think it would be cool if he had that swim in particular, 17.63, that so many NCAA swim fans could just be like, oh, 17.63? You mean Caleb Dressel's 53 for, like that is just such a, it's like that trend was going around on social media where it's like, you can't identify fans of whatever from just a number. And like people are saying like swim times and stuff. That was a super common one. And that I think it's just such an iconic swim in the NCAA format. And I think it'd be cool if it also got the title of the longest lasting one. Which is, it might be a weird reason to want to see some records go down, but I'm game for seeing any records go down all the time. So it doesn't really take much to convince me to want a record to go down.
Amen. I think both of those would be great records. I think both have shots. I think
1,000 is a little tougher to just get someone who's going to go that fast. Bobby Fink almost got it going out in his 1650, which is hilarious.
Well, and that's why I'm like, maybe if someone like Zalan Sarkani can throw down like a 14-16, but he goes out really fast, or like, maybe Rex Maurer in January swims the 1,000. I don't know.
He's been going like, PBs in that event and dual meets.
Dude, he went 14:30 in the mile at Texas, which would have won NCAAs last year, I believe.
I think I remember that. Yeah, I think I remember reading that.
Yeah, he did. Yeah. So, like, I think it could. It is possible. And then obviously Ilya, I think, is knocking on the door in that 200 fly. So it's just a matter of if he can do it at a conference or at NCAAs or even maybe a freaking dual meet. Because he last year in a dual meet, he was 137.8, I think. 137.9
something.
Yeah. So, yeah, it would be great to see. Mine is also one of the oldest records in the books. Maybe the oldest NCAA record in the books. It's Missy Franklin's 200 free.
I think that one is the oldest. Yeah, that's why she's why I had to specify men's.
Okay, yeah, 139.1 from 2015, which is funny because we're at this point where swimming has gotten so fast that records just get broken pretty routinely, and it's like it's not even 10 years old, right? Like no NCAA or yards record is not like 9 years old is the oldest one. I guess it's turning 10 soon.
Be a good time for it to get broken.
It'd be a good time for it to get broken. And honestly, I don't know that anyone outside of Gretchen Walsh could break it, which is kind of a bummer. But maybe she'll lead off the 800 free relay again, go 138, help the UVA women break the 800 free relay record. Like it just let's get it off the rotation because yeah.
I can confidently say if she breaks the oldest NCAA record, that will definitely be her 5th best event. No longer tied with the 200 back. It definitely is all the way up to 5th.
Yeah, we could say that confidently. It would be her 5th best event. Yeah. So I would love to see that record get broken. We'll see if it happens. But anyway, that's the breakdown for the day.